was joking around with Gypsy about doing a class. I had to tell her like 50 times. I am not an expert in this field. I'm just somebody who thoroughly enjoys sitting in my garage, tinkering on taking things and making art as cheaply as possible. And I started to talk about recycling, and so the theme for this is green steam. Kind of a cheesy name, I'm sure, but up until the Victorian era and the Industrial Revolution, people actually did recycle. I mean, it's a thousands and thousands of year old concept, because you didn't have all of these readily available resources and items. So it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that it became cheaper to make things new than replace it that you started to get into closer to the society that we're in, and now where we just throw something away and buy something new. And so even though it's not a Victorian concept, recycling, I'm trying to flip it a little bit and make it a steampunk concept, which most people already do anyway. I mean, I'm already looking around and everybody's probably just as good, if not better than me at making these things. So it's not me lecturing you on how to do stuff. It's, I just love talking about this stuff. I mean, last night we were out at the smoking area by the bar just talking for a couple hours, I think, about all these cool ideas. And that's what I love. I mean, I love coming to an event like this and meeting people and saying, ooh, how did you do that? Like, how did you get those holograms in your goggles? I mean, that's amazing. So I'll focus on what I have been doing, which is building contraptions, building crazy stuff for my daughter, for my wife, for me, and just kind of go into a little bit about, I guess, how I do it. First thing I do is I'm hopelessly addicted to flea markets. I cannot drive by a flea market without twitching and shaking and turning the car around, and my wife goes, oh God, no, please. And my daughter is starting to get addicted too. And we have a lot of fun because we'll walk around the flea market and we'll see some odd object. And this is some poor object that when it was created, it had delusions of grandeur. It was going to be this loved by a kid or an adult or whatever. It was going to be this great thing. And now it's junk in a flea market. You pay $2, which is one of the good things, is a lot of the things you get at flea markets are pretty cheap. So we see something and we go, sure, that's a Boy Scout bugle. And I don't know any Boy Scouts that bugle anymore, and I don't know any Boy Scouts, and I have a daughter. But you know what? I bet if I put a headphone from my iPod in it, that it would amplify the sound just enough that you could hear it. And so I did. It's not quite loud enough. I'm a kind of a heavy metal guy by nature, so I want it louder. So I added a... Say again?
Very directional, though.
Yes, it's a directional speaker. So I added another one. I was walking through, and I saw a 1920s buggy horn. It looks like this, but it curved around more, and it had a big rubber ball you squeeze, and the reed would go, and that was your horn. So I saw that, and I thought, well, that's a kind of neat looking one. And I started to polish it up, and I thought, no, I'm just going to leave it like it is. I had this jewelry box. Actually, it was a music box. You open it up, and it played, Brahms' Lullaby or something like that. Well, I gutted all that stuff out of there to make room for my iPod, because I think that it's a lot of fun to take something new and steampunk it, right? But if you can take something that has a 19th century purpose, but add our technology into it to combine the two, because really that's what we're doing, right? I mean, we're not 19th century people. We're lawyers and accountants and computer nerds for the Army and whatever else that you guys do. But we're blending into that time. So that's what I try to do with all of my stuff. And I usually make something 5 or 6 times before I feel like it's finished. I've already seen things on this that I want to change, take apart, and do different. But that's kind of the fun of it too. As far as like the recycling bit goes, this nifty little pistol was a toy, kind of I think it's lead maybe or pewter computer pistol, and I thought it was cool, and I liked the handle of it, but I didn't want to walk around with just a regular pistol. I have to start breaking out the glue and the hoses and things and start playing around with it. And about a couple weeks ago, somebody gave me a big bucket of plumbing parts. It had brass pieces in it, and they're like, "You're one of those steampunk nerds. Why don't you have this?" And I was like, "It's brilliant." And this was one of the gauges in it. So he was going to throw the stuff out or try to, give the bucket of things for the price of the copper. And so this gauge required a little bit of modification on the gun to sit there and cut all this stuff out. I can tell you that if you work with a Dremel, it's a beautiful thing. It's also a pretty scary thing too if you're getting a little too impatient. So that's my safety message for you. Be patient, because losing a finger to a pistol that you can't pull the trigger now on would really suck. This piece right here, I had a hole here, so I was like, what am I going to put in that? Thought about a vacuum tube, and then I thought about I'd break the vacuum tube, putting some kind of a light, maybe I'll get a hard plastic piece or something. Well, this is actually the reed from the 20s buggy. And when I had cut the buggy horn, when I cut it, I had this extra piece there, and I didn't want to throw it away because it defeats the whole purpose of the recycling your junk into art. And so I looked, and it was the same diameter as the hole to this PSI gauge. And then I did a sad attempt at bending it up to make it look somewhat like a smokestack or something. Not an easy thing to bend without the proper tools. And then these hoses, I'm totally addicted to putting hoses on things because I think it looks really, really cool. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or any other type of hardware store, they sell a hose like this. It's I think it's called Mr. Lawn Doctor or Dr. Lawn Doctor or something like that. But it's a really thin hose. And the cool thing about it is you can distress it with a sanders block. If you ever seen the drywall sanders block, get one of those from Home Depot because you can polish up, get a really nice finish on copper, on brass, on rubber hoses so they look a little bit older. And it's a couple bucks. And you don't go through all of this sandpaper, and it gives it a real nice texture. The hose also, the diameter of the inside is perfect for if you drill a hole and you put a screw in something, the hose goes right over top of the screw. So I always, in the beginning, would have trouble, how am I going to attach all of these things to the stuff, And so I found that, if you start paying attention to the diameter of the tubes and things you're using, then it makes it a whole lot easier. So just a hole drilled in it, a screw, and the hose over top. And then this is a candelabra type thing I paid $2 for at the DAV store. That's another thing too. If you can go to a DAV store, I don't know if they have those here, but in Virginia it's disabled American veterans. It's like a thrift store that a lot of the profits go to disabled American veterans. So you can get your really cool steampunk junk and make stuff and, put money towards people that could use it. My Gatling gun is actually the first thing that I made. It has been through several iterations of how it's looked. You can look at it and recognize most parts to it, right? I mean, you see that the main piece of it is a screw gun. Nowadays, if you do any type of work with a screw gun or carpentry or anything, you got to get the nicer heavy-duty DeWalt stuff, and the battery lasts forever. A puny Black & Decker one like this just will infuriate you, and you might be tempted to throw it away, or somebody else might be tempted to throw it away. This is when you can step in and say, I'll take it, and I'm going to make a gun. And they'll look at you crazy, but, hey. I also purposely try not to do too much, for me, fancy stuff. Like, maybe it's because I'm not too technically good at it, the really elaborate artistic side. So a lot of my stuff is kind of just raw and on there. And this is a good example of that. This, if you've never done any plumbing work, is a copper strip that you attach to 2x4s and you run plumbing pipes through. I saw shiny copper with holes in it, and I thought, that's pretty darn cool. And I clipped the ends and bent it in and wrapped it around to hide the strip there. Now that you can find those sometimes at flea markets, but not very often. Usually it's you're going to have to go to Home Depot or Lowe's at some point in time to get stuff. There was a guy who was selling a clock, and it was busted, and he said, I'll sell it to you for 50 cents. And I didn't really care about the clock. I just wanted something that with all these gears on it, and so I made out pretty good. Here's another thing for you too. You can find PSI gauges at the wazoo, right? Most of them are new PSI gauges, and they don't look that cool. They don't have that vintage look about them. But if you go looking on eBay for vintage PSI gauges, you can be looking at $40-50 a gauge. Sometimes I've seen them as much as $250. And if you got that kind of money to spend, let me know and I'll put some stuff together for you. If you don't and you're like me, then one thing that you can do is almost all the new PSI gauges, the cap that's on here is real easy to pop off. You take a thin jeweler's screwdriver and just pop the top off. And then the reason why I say that is because the PSI gauge is nothing more than the pressure actually pushes the needle, which turns the needle on the front. So you don't have to worry about breaking anything. The cover that's in there, the modern looking one that says PSI and doesn't have any kind of flare to it, you can go on your computer, even if you have no kind of Photoshop or anything, software like that, you can go into Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, make a circle, and then you put a design in there. You can put a old weathered texture and then type some text in there of your group or your character's name. Print it off, and if it doesn't fit, print off another one, and so you get the right size, and then you just put it in there, some two-sided tape, and then you have a somewhat customized looking PSI gauge. And then the other thing that I like to do is I like paint. And my favorite stuff, Rust-Oleum makes hammered textured paint, and it gives it this real, not like real hammered metal. If you ever see that, the circles are about the size of a penny, but it gives you a really neat texture. So I'll shoot everything with with a flat black enamel to give it a good base, and then the colors will be above that, and then you won't have like blue or purple or green shining through where you missed a spot. Everything goes black, and then I start putting this stuff on. And the textures are really good, and that's what I did. This is a brand new PSI gauge that I got from my brother. I didn't go and buy it, but so paint can add a lot to it, and just get creative. And especially if you're finding something that's 50 cents at a flea market, and you paint it and it looks like crap, then what you do is you take a Q-tip and some paint thinner, and then you clean off as much as you can, but not perfectly clean, and you paint it again. And that multiple layers of paint will add a distressed look about it too. So in the end, you'll end up with something, you have more practice, and it'll look cooler. So I had, back to the gun. Obviously with a Gatling gun, you had to have multiple barrels, and they got to rotate, right? And I was playing with the idea of how do I get that to happen? How do I make it rotate? And so what I did was pretty simple. This is all PVC pipe. I got my measurements out the way I wanted it, and then there's a main PVC pipe that goes down the middle with caps on the end. And before I put the caps on the end, I drilled a hole out and I put a bolt. So there's a PVC pipe, cap, and a bolt sticking out. So whatever is going around it can spin. And then I took these wonderful things here that look really, really cool. Anybody who knows what they are always looks at it and goes, that's funny. It's a toilet flange. Or actually it's called a closet flange, but it's all associated with your natural recycling process going away. And I just thought that was funny, and I also thought it looked cool too. I mean, they're really neat. You can get them for a couple of bucks. I think they're somewhere in the $5 mark at Home Depot. That's one that I would recommend you get a new one. Because the thought of recycling an old one, I don't know, that's a little gross. And so they have some that have a flat end that's covered, which is what I used here, and then they have some that pass through. And so then I was looking for my barrels, and I didn't want to get metal, I didn't want to do wood or copper, even though it would look awesome with copper pipes. It had to be heavy, I mean really heavy. This is almost all plastic, and it's a pretty sizable thing to carry around anyway. And so I was in my flea market, and I saw a golf bag. And in the golf bag, they had all these little plastic tubes in there for the golf clubs to go in. And I said, how much do you want for the, because there's no golf clubs in it. So how much do you want for the plastic tubes? And the guy said, I don't know, $1? I said, perfect. And so I grabbed a whole bunch of gun barrels walking out, and everybody's like, what a moron, you know? And I'm like, I got a Gatling gun now! How do you like that? And so it just kind of happened to work out that the diameter of everything, I'm not a math guy, but the diameter worked out so that I could put 5 barrels in with my center barrel, which is the support for the spinning motion, in the toilet flange. And they were just a hair too big, so the effect was that it squished them in there, and I didn't have to worry about them coming apart. Like shooting my Gatling gun, look at me, I'm cool, and it goes and falls apart. And so, yeah, so that's how the fundamental pieces of it work. This right here, does it look familiar to anybody? It is a dog water bottle. Our dog chewed on the tip of it and broke the tip off, and so I was like, I'm going to use that. And I thought, because you have to have, if you're going to have hoses, you should have something that the hoses go from and to, right? And so some kind of container that holds your plasma energy or whatever your power source is should have some kind of a container. It would have been really cool if this was clear, and then I could have put lights in it and made some, or maybe put a small plasma disc in there, the belt clip ones. That would have been neat to put in there, something like that, but maybe at a future iteration of it. And then this is another great thing that you may never take two looks at. These little pipe holders. They're real easy to bend, they're real easy to cut, and they have different sizes of diameter, and they're fantastic for attaching things to things. You have a pipe and you want to add a smokestack to your radio, but it's unstable, so you add one of those to it, and it makes it stable and adds copper, and it looks cool. I'll give, and then one last thing. I don't know how many of you, when you were a kid, put a card in the spoke of your tire because it sounded like a Harley. I was like, I wanted to add something to it that achieved that noise, but also made people think about when they were a kid, because really that's kind of why we're all here, right? We're big kids. And so I added this piece to it that, to give that effect and make people think and have fun. So I'm going to need an assistant. Would you please come up here? To volunteer you. I mean, I could just shoot it, but it's much cooler if I get somebody from the audience in it. All right, so you want to hold here, because you'll notice that because of the weight, how much would you say that weighs?
Maybe 10 pounds.
Yes. So it's not too bad. If I had used copper, he'd be like, this guy's a jerk. I would need, like the real Gatling guns had tripods that they mounted to. The break points or pressure points is right here. So if you hold it like a pistol, besides the fact that you're strong, if you hold it like a pistol, it's going to bend and you're going to warp your gun and possibly break it. So go ahead and let loose. And with thank you, sir. Let's get a big round of applause for my assistant. So Tommy did a fantastic job of demonstrating.
Now he's going to want one too.
Yes, well now he'll know how to make one. And honestly, I mean, I was fortunate enough that I found a lot of these things at flea markets. It's not always easy. So you kind of have a project in your mind and you look for parts. And it may take you 6 months to find all the pieces you need. But take the time, Don't rush it, put something together, and then not like it. But altogether, I spent probably less than $20 on all of it together. And the most expensive parts were the hoses from Home Depot, because I just have never been able to find in a flea market rubber hosing. And in aquariums, or if you find a flea market that they got a $5 aquarium, look for the things like there, because some of the things from an aquarium you can get, the little aerator tubes that makes the bubbles, and I don't know what it does for the fish other than maybe provide some entertainment in the bowl, but it makes bubbles. So if you ever want to make a project where you have like a liquid container on your backpack, you can put something like that in there and it adds a bubble display, and it's pretty cheap and easy to do. I've seen there's one guy, he has a Professor X wheelchair, and he has these two big things on the back, and it has cherry vodka or something like that in it. But he has aerators, and they're making the bubbles, and it just adds a cool visual effect. And a sound, too, you know. It's all about sights and sounds and what you see. Man, I really wish I had my big jetpack. The big jetpack, I got an old brass fire extinguisher about this big. Really, really expensive piece because the brass alone is worth a lot of money for, you know, just the brass itself. But I got lucky because I was wheeling and dealing with an antique shop, and he had about a dozen of them, and he let it go to me for about $20, or for $20. And I snatched it up, and even at the protest of my wife, and I snatched it up, and I said, "But honey, it's going to be a jetpack." She's like, "It's a fire extinguisher." I said, "No, believe me, it's going to be a jetpack." And so I had this big, heavy as heck fire extinguisher, and I was like, "How am I going to make this into a jetpack?" Because in my mind, I could see two more cylinders on the side of it as thrusters, this being the fuel source. And I could see, you know, gauges and tubes and stuff like that. And then I thought, you know what? On top of the fire extinguisher, kind of flanges out like this, a plasma ball would fit perfectly on there. So EdmondScientific.com, off I went, and I got a $12 mini plasma disc, or plasma ball. The ball's about that big around, and it sits on there, and it's battery powered, and it adds a awesome Tesla look to your piece. Then keeping in mind that you can drill a hole, put a screw in your metal or your brass tank with hoses like this that come off of it, or you can take copper wire and wrap them around a pencil, a dowel rod, whatever diameter you want, and then put them on. I started to just add stuff. Somewhere around the 25-pound mark, I started to think I was adding too much, and then I was like, I need an electrical system, because the plasma ball was not enough. You know, that's just not cool enough. And my brother works construction, and he, the emergency lights you see there, I don't know if all of them, but a lot of them have a 12-volt battery that's about this big and about that thick. And, you know, even though it's Edison, not Tesla, DC voltage is pretty easy to work with. It's, you know, plus, minus, and it's on or off. So I took this battery, and I was like, wow, that fits underneath of my brass fire extinguisher really well. And then I went, how am I going to keep the battery there? So I got thinking about it, and I got went to Home Depot, and I got some bolts about this long, 2 bolts. And then I searched flea markets trying to find one, and to no avail, and so I had to break down and go to Home Depot and buy it. But a brass kick plate. The door, you see little brass, it's called a kick plate. They have brass coated, and then they have real brass. I recommend the real brass because the brass coated, the coating will come off as soon as you start to mess with it, try to bend it. And so I was there with my vice grip on the bench, trying to bend this brass kick plate from a plate like this to go up, and up. So basically making a shape like this for my battery, to hold my battery. And on a small vise, it's really difficult. So it didn't look as pretty as it could have, but it did its job. And then the 2 bolts came through like this, and then that U-shaped piece sits down on top of it, and the bolts with a washer in front hold it in there perfectly, and the battery slides in. And I just took a piece of Velcro and put it around it so the battery was secure. Then I was like, okay, now I've added another 5 pounds to this monstrosity. And I started thinking about the electrical stuff. And I'm not an electrical person. A couple of the guys I was talking to last night are really sharp on that. So talk to people and ask them, and then you learn all the tricks about, I blew up an LED light, or I had some really cool old tractor headlights that were 12 volt, but they weren't 12 volt, they were 6 volt. And they were sold to me as 12 volt lights, and I plugged them up to my 12 volt battery, and they went pow! And smoke came out, and I was like, okay, that's probably not a 12 volt headlight. But I bought those because I wanted to have headlights here. I mean, if you're going to have a jetpack, you really need to have headlights in case you have to fly at night, right? And so, it's kind of hard to explain. So imagine this is the jetpack. I took a copper pipe and I ran it across like this, and at first I tried to put a bolt in it, and that was just really unstable. And then those little own-looking clips for pipes, bolted right on there, perfect. And they make them in brass and it looked great. And so then I drilled a hole here and a hole here, and because the headlights that I did buy, they're LED, 12-volt LED headlights, so they use almost no electricity. They didn't kill my battery at all, and they just bolted right on top of it, and they worked perfect. And then running the power was tricky because I ended up with a lot of wires coming in to somewhere, and I found a black box. It was about this big and that thick, and it was used to, you could put it on the wall and you could find outlets or wires. You know, it read voltage. So, oh, here's a wire, don't drill. I gutted that out, and I used that as my control panel because it was nice and big, and I could put it on, and it's basically about the size of this, and I can hang it on my belt and have all of my switches here. So I ran all of my wiring to the box, and the little screw-on caps to close wires is a really good thing, because if you do like I did and you buy the ones that are like a little strip and you clip it in and it's permanently in there, and then you clip it in, and you go, oh crap, I put the wrong wire in there or something, then you got to cut all the wires and you chuck it. So, because you can't pull the wire back out. Or you realize you needed 5 inputs and 1 output, then you don't have room to work. So I like them. There looks like a little cap, and then you just put all your wires together and you screw it on. And if you mess up, unscrew it, move your wires around and do it. So you basically have all of your positive and negatives coming to one point, and then you have them feeding the different switches. And that's probably better done by somebody who has insurance or stuff like this, or a lawyer. But anyway, you get the point. It's a lot to get into, but it's relatively simple, and it really makes a big difference. The key thing that I learned is that all batteries are created equal. Meaning every battery is from AAA all the way up to D cell, or 1.5 volts. So a AAA battery and a D battery is the same, puts the same voltage out, but bigger means lasts longer. And if you put them positive, and negative, wired like this, then they're still putting out 1.5 volts, but they're going to last twice as long. If you put them flip-flop, like on every remote control, positive, negative, then it's making a chain, and it's actually making around 3 volts. So it's a real simple math to do on figuring out. And when you get your things, you look at, okay, how many batteries does it take? I had an LED light on the side of my daughter's jetpack here, and it took 3 AAA batteries. So I was like, okay, 4.5 volts. I'm sorry, it took 2. And then these here, they're little motors, they took 2 AA batteries. So they use the same voltage, and so I knew I could use I could wire them all in one point, and I could make a battery pack that powers the light and the fans. And I should have swapped my batteries out because my batteries are dying, but if you can add movement and function to your steampunk art, it actually becomes art, and it's much cooler, and people like that. I'll tell you, maybe I'll bring it up here in the light so you can see it. Jetpacks are my favorite thing to build, just because when you walk around with a jetpack, you just can't help but feel cool. Obviously you're not going to fly, but if you can get the perception that you might actually be able to fly with this, then all the better. So, anybody recognize what this is? It's pretty clear what it is. Wall sconce. DAV store, $2. Solid brass. But when you flip them upside down, then you have a cylindrical shape that can hold a motor. So there's a little motor in here, and these guys right here came from the dollar store. They're little fans that you put 2 batteries in, and you turn it like this, and you fan yourself. Like I'm too lazy to do this. Well, I took the motor out and the fan out, and I made note. Okay, 2 batteries equals 3 volts, right? and then I just wired it in. I used the thin tubing here to disguise my wires, but it wasn't thick enough for two, so I disguised the red wire and wrapped it around. Everything comes and gets fed into here, my little junction box slash, steam tank or whatever you want to come up with it to be. And then I made myself a little door here so that my person could get to the batteries. So it uses 2 D batteries, which I found out that with these fans only last about a day's worth of your daughter going, check this out. I may think about a bigger tank and getting more batteries in, but then it adds too much weight. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try to find some rechargeable Ds that I can use. And the switch is kind of cool too, because I like getting these switches from Radio Shack, because when they're on, they light up. And that looks cool too. And they also make, and they're like $1.50 at Radio Shack. And the thing I learned about switches is, if it says it's a 12-volt switch, it'll work all the way down to 1.5 volts. That's like the max that it can handle before it goes pop smoke and boom. So that's something to keep in mind about switches. And it's good because, when you start spending hours looking for a 3-volt switch and it doesn't exist, then you know why. Because the 12-volt will handle it just fine. And then when you're making a jetpack, if you find the lightest possible wood is the best possible wood. Because you can always stain it, you can always make it look how you want it. And then if you get foam matting from the kind of prickly looking stuff you put on a bed mattress, that foam stuff, you can cut out a shape on the back and then get some scrap leather. Tandy leather is my favorite place to go. And you can put some leather around and some furniture tacks, and then you have now padding. This one doesn't have it because I literally built this week before I came here. But my big jetpack has padding on the back, and I may even incorporate the vibrating discs from my car seat back massage because it's 12 volts. And when I walk around with a 40-pound jetpack, my back is killing me. So I thought, I'm going to give myself a back massage while I walk around with my jetpack. And then I can show people, check this out. And so you can hide that in the foam padding, and it's 12 volts, so it would run off the same battery. What else? And I added the fairy wings because it was for my daughter, and I thought it was too industrial looking for a lady. And so, because she's into the frilly stuff and big hats and corsets and whatnot, so I had to add the fairy wings, which a friend of mine makes. If anybody's ever in the market for neat fairy wings, she even has steampunk ones, shoot me an email and I'll pass you over to her. But yeah, so, and then like I said, there's a place called Tandy Leather, Tandy. If you probably have your own place, or if you don't, that's a good place to go. You can get cheap stuff, nice leather for cheap prices. And then you cut strips and make your straps, for your shoulder straps, or bracers or whatever you want. I am kind of at a point now. I guess I could tell you about some other projects that I got coming up before we all melt in this heat. It's hot here. Some of the things that if you go to an AcroCon next year, there's a lady who has a booth, Cindy McLeod, and she can tell you all about the event. But we're going to go there next year, and one of my goals is to bring with us, God willing that it'll be ready by then, is a steampunk tank. The plans that we have for it, I'm relying heavily on my father who does welding and stuff like that. But we're going to build a tubular frame like this, and a tubular frame going up like that. So it looks real rudimentary like a steam tractor. And then it will have either bicycle wheels or wagon wheels. And then the pilot will sit in it and pedal with a bicycle mechanism to drive the tank. But the sides of it, to get in from the tube that goes like this, they're going to have a little bit of a Back to the Future type flare, and the door's going to open up like this. They're going to go, and open up like the DeLorean in Back to the Future. And then the pilot can get in and drive. And then I'm going to have Gatling guns on the front of it, and lights and smoke and steam engine on the back. So anyway, hopefully it'll be ready. And if you're in the Steampunk or the UpState Facebook group, as you have probably already seen, I have no problem posting things. I'm like, oh, look at this I made, look at that I made, and I try not to bombard it too much. But so that's a project. I'm also working on a. I'm trying to refine my leather skills so that we can have that I can make things like this look a lot better than they do. And I have a leather shoulder armor that has a plasma disc here and has tubes and hosing and stuff. And then on the top of it, I want to make 2 mini guns using the same fan motors that are here. Spin mini Gatling gun barrels. And I was given a challenge yesterday, not only because this part is easy, making it spin, but to make them turn too. So I'll have to figure out that. I may cheat and have like a lever system in my back that does it, but I aim to do that. And then, I guess last, if that's not enough, I'm working on a steampunk mech warrior using drywall stilts. So you have this big mechanical looking mech warrior walking around and looking cool. But and the way I'm planning on building that, I'm trying to get away, since I don't know anything about fiberglass, is there's a plastic sheeting that you can buy that you can heat up with a small torch, and then shape it, and then it hardens up and make like plastic armor basically. We'll use that to make the thing and then distress it and paint it. But it's a pretty ambitious one there. I probably have better luck with the tank because my dad will be helping me with that. I think I've already seen some cool stuff. Maybe we should have some of you guys talk about some of your things now, because I mean, it's like I said, it's supposed to be the way I envision steampunk is this great collaboration of creative people, saying, oh, you could do this, you do that, or and maybe you can get up and talk about your pistol, because I was looking at that thinking that looks pretty cool. Nah, come on, I don't know anything about it.
Wow. I'm actually good at this part. It's just paint, $3 or $1 spark gun, and I don't even know where that's from anymore. I think I tore apart a grill or something. And the springs, you can buy springs at the flea market real cheap, and this is just like copper wire you can buy at Walmart. But like I think this is, it's just paint, guys. I want to get into what you're doing, lights,
Right.
movement, because it does that a lot. Like I'm not satisfied with this gun because it doesn't make noise or can't shoot you with water.
Well, did you see the pirates that were walking around?
No, I haven't.
There was one of the pirates, and I can't remember his name. It might be Dave. He has glowing tubes and stuff in the pistols, and he's really sharp on wiring up LED lights. So
Find Dave, huh?
you find it might not be Dave. Did you know who he was? The pirate group. One guy has a mohawk. He's with that same group. He has like a pink shirt and a mohawk. But in that group there of airship pirates, one of the guys is really sharp on wiring LEDs, and apparently you can daisy chain them. But he was the one that was telling me about when you start daisy chaining LEDs and you put a battery on it, you're gonna need to put a resistor because it's too much voltage and you end up blowing up LED lights, which are cheap, but no sense in blowing up stuff unless you're actually really getting to blow real stuff up. That would be cool. Anybody have anything they want to show or talk about? Because I mean, surely you have some good ideas.
I've got a few suggestions. There's a place, I believe it's called trainsoftware.com, for LEDs. They have them already wired up. All you have to do is twist them around the wires to the battery holder.
Huh.
And it's real easy to do, so you can put 7 on one. And it's one of those little watch batteries, and it'll last for like 12 hours.
Wow.
And also, I'm in the process of working on building a vacuum form table, because I'm thinking about doing something very similar to you with the big giant robot. And I'm still new to that, but the vacuum form table is surprisingly easy to build. If you look up anybody building the stormtrooper armor, that's what they use to make.
Yeah, that's where I got the plastic sheeting idea from. It's the guy that built a whole troop of stormtrooper armor. What was it called again? Train?
I believe it's trainsoftware.com. I found it looking for LEDs for my model building. I build a lot of the Gundam, and they have the little mono eyes the bad guys do, and that's where I found it. So
Cool. Sorry, but I had to. Well, no, I had to make a note, but I did it in the wrong
If I
spot.
can get your card or your email, I'll send you the link or something. Fully legal, but it's really easy to do.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great thing because, you know, you can spend months researching, trying to find the right thing for yourself, you know, to use a good source for switches or lights or whatever. And then, you know, Bob down the street or somebody else in your club, you know, has a good resource. So I'm always, you know, trying to get people to collaborate and share their ideas. And anything that I build, I would be happy, even though I do sell stuff. Yeah, I'm more than happy to help somebody, walk them through it, talk them through it, and have you build it yourself, because it's much cooler for you to build it yourself than to buy one from me. Even though I'm not opposed to that, but I'll leave that to, you know, art galleries and stuff. But I just love seeing people, and particularly because I'm the father of a 15-year-old, seeing teenagers and all the way down to little kids getting into it. That's the best, because anybody here parent? I mean, obviously you are.
Yeah, that's the
So
oldest.
parents, raise your hand. Okay. So as
There's two
a
more after this one, but
all right.
I didn't deem them old enough to come.
Well, as a parent, you want your kid to be as smart as possible, right? And I think of all the genres out there, I do some medieval stuff and all that, but of all the things that are out there, steampunk is my absolute favorite, especially when it relates to my kid, because if she starts tinkering with tools or whatever, starts making something, she's exercising her creativity, but she's also thinking science, because I always try to work a scientific angle into it, you know, so it has a story. Now, I'll be honest, I generally rely on my brother-in-law, who's a major in the Air Force, and he's an engineer. And I go, Dave, I want to somehow make this this Gatling gun shoot plasma. How would I do that? Or how would it? And he's like, so you want me to give you some? He's an engineer thinking, theoretically, and he starts giving me this long spiel that I don't even understand. But it's always good to find that engineering person to kind of give you a twist, because even if it's complete and utter BS, like nobody's gonna fly with two little fans like this and wings. But if it looks cool and has a decent story around it, then it's even better than if you really could fly. Well, maybe not that much, but and so I think I had the discussion yesterday with Julian about he was saying he just thinks art, but he doesn't have a skill for the engineering part. And my comment to him was that's the best steampunk person to have. Because somebody who is an engineer and does think that way, they generally have a tough time with the creativity part. Like, they can build the most elaborate machinery, but it won't have any kind of artistic flair to it, or generally speaking. So you pair up somebody like that with a bunch of artists, and then you get some amazing stuff. But if you're comfortable with the art side, you can read in Wikipedia and Google and figure out anything you want on how to wire up anything. And like you gave me a great idea with the miniature trains. That's got to be I've seen a ton of them in the flea market, and they have lights and things, so you could probably scrounge things out, get gear-looking things from the wheels or the headlights out of it and put that in something else. So, I also look for plastic toys that make annoying noises and flashing lights, because you can get that for a couple bucks and then take it apart and take the lights out of it.
I'm going to ask you, what was the tubing again? Did you say that was lawn and garden tubing, or no? You said you bought the tubing at Home Depot, but
Yes.
which department was that?
I think, well, it's in the gardening section.
It is.
Some of it you can get, if you want clear tubing, you go to the aquarium section.
Right.
Walmart has aquarium tubing too. And the only thing I would think that I would want clear tubing is if I was going to put light in it, which I had a really good idea that I'm stealing from the guy that has the robots on his hat. He has a rope light. It's a thin, flexible rope that runs off a battery and lights up. And I was like, ooh, if I took aquarium clear plastic tubing and I put that light in there, then I can have tubes like this that have lights in it,
Well, they have those as Christmas decorations now. You can get lighted tubes.
True. I mean, you get away from putting it in tube, but I like all of the different stuff like that, because really having a clear or a thin rope, might not be as stable. Or you could probably paint it or something like that to add some rigidity to it, but I don't know.
Plumbing department, like those larger diameter vinyl tubing, clear or black.
Right.
That's 50 feet.
Oh, really? You have to stand up and show off your hand.
That's
amazing. No, that's just clear, started out clear vinyl tubing, I like to say with rubber buff. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And the fingertips are like caps off various household bottles, like chloroseptic and bug repellent and a couple other things we raided the medicine cabinet for. And this is an old, actually this is the more peculiar thing because it's a motorcycle hand guard that I wasn't using anymore. It was a nice, it had a nice curve that kind of fit the carpal bones, you know, so that was just looking through junk drawers and
Right.
stuff, you know, and,
Put your hand up like this. The backside.
oh,
The palm there.
yeah, just, it's the other glove, this, this stuff, contact cement. My dear wife showed me how to use that. Oh, and then other oddball things you can do, different viscosity or specific gravity liquids, you know, like mixing, or not mixing, because they don't mix, mineral oil with water or mineral oil with glycerin, thank you, yeah, and a little glycerin will mix with food coloring though, so you can get, you know, that kind of
That's
stuff.
cool.
I mean, flip your site.
Oh, well, that's, yeah, this is another, that was another bicycle. Yeah, bicycle parts, this is a clamp for a bicycle reflector that goes behind the seat, you know, that has a pivot built into it and even has like a little,
That's genius, right?
yeah, on this,
Come on, let's get some round.
this is from bicycle parts. The switch is actually from a bicycle shoe. This is a bicycle cleat. So that was just my, you know, bike parts were just my peculiar odd thing to have, so that's why.
That is huge. That's awesome. So you can see there's an infinite amount of possibilities to make really cool stuff out of, because that I could just, and I started to see, like, you know, all of this stuff, you know, materializing up his arm, and then he has a whole Tin Man costume or suit of armor or something. Cool. Yes. Well, 350 was my time. I'm close enough for government work. So.
One more quick suggestion.